don't have any regrets, just have things you can learn from. And that's the same in writing as well. Like, don't hide, this is who I used to be and this is what I am now. It shows you the journey that you've gone on yourself.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Took Fresh, and stand back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by Andy Spoors, a freelance wrestling writer. So welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom, how's it going? Really good to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you, my friend. So if we take this back to the beginning, where do you first discover wrestling as a fan?
Yeah, so going way back, I'm now 33, going all the way back to the beginning. It's probably sort of 7, 8 during the Attitude Era of WWE, and it was very much a case of trying to get hold of any kind of content, which was very difficult back then. So really what we had in the UK, for anyone who might be watching or reminiscing, was we used to see these posters would pop up around town, and you'd see sort of knockoff versions, wish versions, as it probably would be called nowadays, of Attitude Era wrestlers. So you'd get someone very, well, I don't know the right way of kind of explaining it, but you've got like The Rock, who would probably
impersonators. No.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But The Rock would be called like the Pebble or something, just to be able to avoid it. The Undertaker would be called the Grave Digger. So you'd have those kind of matches, and it would be very much a case of like, let's just stick it in a local sports centre. Or I remember my granddad used to take me to Lincoln Hospital. He used to rent out one of the halls they had there. So my granddad would take me to there, or you'd see them in a holiday camp, etc. So I know that's kind of still a tradition these days as well, where like Butlins or Haven might have a wrestling show on. But yeah, certainly that's where the fandom started in the midst of the Attitude Era.
You talked about Butlins or Haven having wrestling on. Nowadays, it's sort of more independent wrestlers and not really people trying to be like, being a copy of a character in WWE or something. Imitator, that's the word I'm looking for. Do you think those imitators would still work today, or do you think because the world of kayfabe and quote unquote has been shattered, they might not?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to say. I don't think they would, the way that they used to be, they would survive in the kind of the wrestling industry today. I think for anyone who's not in Britain, or anyone who doesn't kind of know the background of British history, wrestling history, we kind of have these peaks and troughs, and that was definitely a trough of the time of the kind of talent side of things. It takes a lot of talent to get in the ring at all, but when you look at the kind of the heyday, where people always harken back to it, when it was World of Sport and it was Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks, etc., which is the one that kind of gets mentioned. That was a peak. That that was arguably where it was at its most popular in Britain. Then it kind of sunk down when the American style kind of came in. However, then you kind of had that resurgence, and now everyone is actually very talented in their own right, and they've got to find their own gimmick. So unless someone kind of embraced the gimmick of, I'm a knockoff wrestler of such and such, and really kind of swerved into it, I don't see it would work, because quite frankly, there's so much talent in the UK and the British scene now, of people finding their own gimmicks and finding their own way of making things work. It just seems it would fall a bit flat and a bit trashy, I guess.
So you brought up there also that it was your grandfather that introduced you to wrestling. So how did your parents feel when you started watching this? Was they like, oh, no, I don't like this? Or was it like that boys will be boys sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely the latter. I think it's one of those things where at the time when the Attitude Era was around, like similar now, you'd get your sticker books and you'd go to the playground and be able to do that, and your parents would give you pocket money to go get yourself some stickers from the shop. But it was never a case of like they were against anything that happened in the Attitude Era or anything in particular. It was just wrestling wasn't their thing. They weren't really kind of growing up on it, and they just found it like it's not to their taste. So they'd probably walk in and turn the channel over, but just because they wanted to watch something else. But they were never kind of discouraging of it. It's probably one of the things that at least I was keeping myself out of trouble. But Yeah, probably asked my sister. She wasn't very appreciative of being choke slammed or put in a submission move or anything like that. So yeah, depends who you ask. But for me, they were never kind of discouraging. And even to this day, mum and dad don't fully understand wrestling, but they appreciate that I get my name out there and they want. So you know, that's all you can hope for. Just be supportive, and that's it really.
So you also brought up there them being supportive and stuff, but changing the channel if they wanted to watch something else. So do you remember maybe you was watching a show and they changed the channel, and then maybe you found out from school the next day or something, and you was like, oh, I missed that moment because they changed the channel?
Yeah, I vividly remember. It was when Mick Foley had brought everyone down to the ring to discover, or to kind of interrogate everyone on they were finally going to get to the bottom of who ran over Stone Cold. And I vividly remember all the superstars were around the ring and Mick Foley was in there. And then just as he was really starting to get into it, the channel got changed onto, I think it was Stargate or something. So yeah, I missed out on that and had to find out off one of my mates. I think this is back when SmackDown was shown on a Saturday night in the UK, because we've had some weird times when
we've had some weird, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah. So I think I had to wait till Monday to find out, or I might have had to fire up the internet and it on dial-up and wait for ages to finally get on WWE or WWF as it was.com back then. So yeah.
So as you start like moving on, going to university, because I know we was talking off camera, you studied journalism at university in Newcastle, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Northumbria Uni, studied journalism, and very much kind of was the plan to come up to Newcastle. My dad's side of the family's all from up here, so it's a lovely part of the country, and I love being up here. And it has a really rich vein of wrestling fans as well. And we've had a few promotions like WCPW and Defiant, and currently got North Wrestling, which is fantastic. So it is a bit of a hotbed up here, but I definitely got into the writing side, was journalism at Northumbria.
Yeah. So, but what was, obviously you was doing journalism, but what was your plan when it came to your career for journalism? What did you want to write about?
Yeah, it was definitely geared towards being a sports writer in particular. I always hoped I would write about Newcastle United as a fan, and then I kind of had a little bit of a taste here and there of it. Part of the journalism course at Northumbria was to do a sports journalism module. So you got a chance to kind of go to the games, and it was back when Newcastle in the Championship. So it was a little bit easier to get accredited and things like that. So I had a little bit of a taste for it. I used to write for a couple of like fanzines here and there before, back when it was printed rather than online predominantly. So yeah, it was definitely my plan was to write and talk about Newcastle United.
So why did your plan change, and when did it change?
I think it was more of a case of like when Newcastle get back into the Premier League, it becomes very difficult to get accreditation, purely on the basis that you have to kind of jump through a lot of hoops. I think there's a payment you have to make, and things like that. So that certainly used to be the process. Then it was kind of I had a bit of a taste of going into the local papers, like and having some work experience in the office, having to pitch like stories, but I never quite able to move across because it's just Newcastle is a city. It's a fairly big city, but there's only a certain amount of people who they can have on the staff who write about it. So kind of then going in and experiencing the news side and kind of pitching ideas for that, I realised that wasn't really for me. So then I sort of moved away and had to just get a day job and pay the bills, etc. And that wasn't just in journalism at all. So for me, it was just a case of like I had to start paying my way, and unfortunately, that wasn't available to write about Newcastle or any kind of sports at that time. So that was the kind of journey it took me on.
So at this time, when you're not involved in journalism at all, where is your wrestling fandom at?
So I think like this is the case for a lot of people. You do have a little bit of a break, I guess, or like where you kind of dip out of what's happening. And certainly at university, when everything is hidden behind Sky Sports and you have to have a subscription, etc., it gets quite costly. So I would only really get to see the bigger pay-per-view events like WrestleMania or Rumble, etc. So my fandom kind of starts to wane a little bit in the sense of I just can't keep up with what's going on a weekly basis. And that's probably between 2007, 2010. And yeah, moving from there, I then start to pick it back up again when I'm earning a little bit of money and can justify, keeping it with Sky, etc.
So you talked about obviously you did talk about your fandom waning when you was at uni and stuff like that. What is something from say the 2007 era to 2010 era that maybe you've gone back and watched now that you are involved in wrestling journalism and gone, oh, I missed this. I wish I didn't. And then what is something you've gone, yeah, I'm glad I missed that.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's kind of cooler to admit it now than it ever has been. But I've always been a massive John Cena fan, and I think like that kind of era was when John Cena was really carrying the company. So going back and watching some of his matches, whether it be WrestleMania or some of the things he went through there, I think I'm right in thinking that some of that was like the Nexus era that I missed. Yeah. That was really cool. But then you also have to you have to go back and go through some of the Authority stuff, which then started coming the back end of that as well. So like you really got the kind of the beginnings of that, and Triple H really sort of dominating during that era as well, in the sense of coming into an Authority figure, and then it evolved into what it was. So again, Evolution, I think, is one of those ones that kind of passed me by to a degree. So going back and watching some of that stuff was cool. I guess Randy Orton, again, he was probably peak around that era as well. So there are some really cool things that I missed out on. And when I'm writing features and stories and things like that, then it's definitely an era that I have to kind of go back and remind myself. And I, even to this day, I still find the odd match or two that actually I wish I'd seen this at the time, and it was really, it's really well done. So definitely Randy Orton and Evolution and John Cena.
You talked about there also being quite a big football fan. So how do you balance both your wrestling work, wrestling fandom, and your football fandom, and make sure all three sides are being taken care of?
With a very patient wife would be the first answer to that. So I'm very lucky in the sense of I get to kind of like go to the football on a Saturday or watch the football over the weekend. And because of obviously the time difference, it's very easy in the UK to kind of separate those two things. And then just having the time in between, on your downtime, is get an article researched or written. So it's a balancing act. And then I have a wife and two kids, so it's trying to make sure I have enough time to be a family man as well. So there's definitely a juggling act to be had. And if it was at the same time, like if it was in the US, where it's kind of, we hear about the stories of it having to go up against NBA or NHL or NFL. Luckily, we don't have that kind of issue across here, because the football's well and truly finished. You can even have a little bit of downtime after it, and then pick up if there's a premium live event on a Saturday or things like that, or catching up while you kind of have it on in the background the next day if it's Raw or SmackDown sort of thing. So yeah, lucky that I've got a very patient wife and a life that's fairly adaptable, I guess.
So what would you say some of the differences are being a football fan to being a wrestling fan?
That's a great question. I think having been to like the likes of WrestleMania and been to cup finals, etc., you can see how passionate people are as fans, and very vocal. And I think the best crossover you can see is it used to be more prevalent is when you'd have the Raw after WrestleMania, and it was always full of British fans who have that more of a culture of let's start, like doing some chants, and it'd be really random chants and just having a bit of a laugh and joke. But I think football is more, it gives you more of a sort of visceral release when there's like a goal or there's a red card or something like that. Then you kind of have that instant release. whereas wrestling is like a sort of a build over the course of like, it can be months, and we've seen some of the storylines recently, and then you finally get that moment, and then even that is comparable, because let's face it, anyone who's watching when Sami Zayn hits Roman Reigns on the back of the with the steel chair, that to me as a kid, just scoring a goal, that noise that comes out of that crowd is massive, one shot like blow. So yeah, I'd say there is a lot of crossovers in terms of getting that kind of like emotional investment and release, but some of it's more sustained in wrestling, whereas like football is, I know it's over the course of a season, but you get those instant
I know what
moments.
you mean though. Yeah. What about being a journalist for both sides? What are some of the differences and similarities you see in both industries?
There's definitely some similarities in the sense of there's very respected journalists that kind of sit at the top, or reporters, or whatever you want to kind of call them, and a lot of those, maybe it's subjective in the sense of like who you actually like follow, or who, or objective, sorry, of who you prefer, like whether it's a Sean Ross-Sapp, or whether it's a Dave Meltzer, or Alex McCarthy, or Alistair George. There's so many people you can follow and who are very talented at what they do, and it's the same in football as well. You also have the flip side of, there's a lot of people who put across opinion or rumors as facts.
Armchair journalists.
Yeah, and that's the same with football and sports as it is in wrestling, but I think maybe they're a little bit more vocal in wrestling. But I'd also say I think that fans aren't scared to call them out on that as well. So it very much depends on who you're reading and what you're looking for. But I think the biggest kind of similarity is there's some very, very talented people who should be respected as well.
Who are some, as you work in the wrestling journalism industry, who are some underrated journalists that you feel like really deserve their flowers, that maybe in the next 5 years will be getting their flowers?
I think it depends what you want to kind of call a journalist. Like, if you want a journalist just to kind of tell you the news, there's certainly like different people for that from the kind of stuff that I like to read. Like, I'm very much a person who enjoys the stories and features. Like, I can tell you later on, my goals as in life or in the kind of wrestling industry, what mine are differ from what other people's would be. But if you're looking for people who to kind of follow, Scott Warren of Rebellious Wrestling, Rebellious Noise, he's got a kind of few different hats that he goes. He's great. He runs a lot of YouTube videos, and he talks about like the ins and outs and the news and stuff like that. So Scott is a big one. A friend of yours, Dom Smith, Sam Smith, all the guys give me a whole yeah. I wish all of them nothing but the best, and I hope they get the flowers, as you say, that they deserve, because they're really fun lads, and they don't take things too seriously, but they're happy to put things out there. But Dom, I would say, is one of the hardest working people that I know. So I really hope he gets to where he wants to be in that sense.
You brought up, I fully agree, nothing but love for Dom, but you brought up there some of your goals in journalism. So what are some of your goals? Yes.
Like, just to kind of like put it straight out there, my goal is to be the best features writer in the world when it comes to wrestling. Like, everything that I do is all about the story. Why should people be invested in this? Like, what in this storyline, in this person, in this business, etc. So, like, I put a lot of love into researching and finding out sort of facts and figures, and making sure that when someone reads a feature of mine, that they feel better educated, or they know a little bit more than going out of it, and maybe even just want to go, actually, he said something there and I'm not seeing that match, so I'm going to go back and watch that match, or maybe just trigger an emotion, because at the end of the day, like, for me, that's what writing should be about, is triggering emotions. So yeah, if I had to kind of like spell it out, and it's taken a little bit of time for me to really kind of nail and drill down into that, it's to be the best wrestling features writer in the world.
Yeah, aim for your dreams is what I'd say. And reading some of your work for research, I fully agree. We've done this completely in the wrong order, and that's just because my brain, I was following the conversation. I do apologize. But how do you get back into the journalism game, and how do you start writing for wrestling?
No, that's fine. Like you just have to go off on a tangent. Sometimes you just go with the flow, and it's cool. But for journalism, I went away. I went traveling for a little while. I came back, and then I retouched base with Simon, who who I wrote for at university, and that whole side of things just came about from he had got a contract with Hard Rock Hell, the festivals that you would, rather than have to kind of stay in a tent and things like that, you would go and stay in a caravan off site. So off season, so you wouldn't have to stay in like a muddy field, etc. And on that, we would then create a magazine that everyone who would go to that festival would then get. My role within that was writing about the features and the lifestyle, etc. That side of things. And I asked, could I do wrestling, and got into it from there. So that really brought me back into writing. I'd always kind of done things here and there for Simon on the side, and it was kind of more of a, definitely a freelance thing. And I got more and more into it, and then we started getting back into the website side of things, and really just developing that relationship with WWE from there.
So how, if someone is a writer and they want to develop a relationship with WWE, what advice would you give them?
I would say just kind of reach out and make contacts wherever you can. I think one of the biggest mistakes people do is, or potentially can do, is just reach out to contracted wrestlers directly and say, like, can we do an interview sort of thing? And the answer, I would imagine 99 times out of 100 is probably going to be no, because you have to go through certain ways and channels, etc. So reaching out, do your research, find out who it is that represents WWE or AEW or whoever it is that you want to speak to, Impact, and go that way. Or if you want, approach some of the guys on the independent scene. They're the guys who will probably be more likely to talk to you on a sort of one-to-one basis. They don't have anyone to kind of answer to. Maybe cut your teeth there, because I think there'd be some people who might think the idea of interviewing The Undertaker sounds amazing until you sat in front of him and you freeze. So it's kind of one of those things of like, get a little bit of experience under you, more for yourself than anything. That's not a kind of like a knock on anyone, but I think I preferred having the chance to speak to a couple of the guys on the indie scene first and speaking to them, developing a couple of relationships, than sitting in front of some of the biggest people that you could do in the industry.
I made that mistake, just to put it out there. I went really big with my first interview, and I'm not going to say it was a bad interview, but it's one that could have been better. I'll put it that way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but you live and you learn, and you're a better person for it, I'm sure.
100%. But you talked about a bit earlier in this conversation how realizing football journalism wasn't for you and bits, but how did you realize that wrestling journalism was for you?
I think it was one of those things where when I wrote an article and I saw it in print, especially, like I still get this buzz off of seeing your name in print, and I think a lot of people who don't do it every day, that it's still a big thing when you see your name in a magazine or a newspaper, and it's like, oh, I did that. That's like, everyone's going to know that I wrote this, and you kind of have that pride in like, okay, I need to make sure it's the best it can be. And I think the one where it really kind of hit home was I got the chance to interview Alistair Black at Download Festival, and like speaking to him, and there was a few of us who were sat in like a porta cabin speaking to him about all manner of things, and he was such a nice guy, and very approachable, and the stuff he was saying was such rich content. I was like, this is really cool. There's so many stories, and like I really want to be part of this. So getting that chance to speak to him really kind of like lit the flames, as it were, I guess. It was such a cool experience.
That's really cool to hear. I was trying to find a segue, but I do apologize, I couldn't think of one. So you talked about also earlier in this conversation, Give Me a Whole Yeah, Dom and that crew getting their flowers. So how do you connect with Dom and start writing for Soundspear and appearing on some Give Me a Whole Yeah streams?
So that came about when we had Clash at the Castle last year in Cardiff. I hadn't met Dom before, and we were doing the press junket where they kind of the superstars were led around the room, and Dom was about 3 or 4 people down from me. I had Scott next to me, and Tom from Cultaholic was there as well, was the other side of me. So when you're waiting, you start having these kind of chats with the people around you, because everyone's really cool. You're all there for the same reason. And yes, to a degree, you're all trying to get the same kind of traffic, but, you know, you need to get on. Everyone helps each other out, etc. So Dom actually approached me and said, "Oh, hey, you're from Brush on Rock. I've read some of your stuff," and that's he's like, it's really cool. He's like, actually, you've been asking some of the questions that I wanted to ask as well, because we're from like similar, like, you know, the cultural side as well as wrestling. So Dom was really nice. He introduced himself, and then that night we had like a sort of media event in Cardiff where we got to have some drinks and food and stuff, and I got to know Dom a little bit better. We spent most of the night, myself and Dom and Scott sat around a table just having a chat, and kept in touch ever since. And then a few months later, I was messaging Dom and I said, I'm going to start up a YouTube channel. He's like, hey, do you want to appear on ours? And it just kind of went from there. And he read some of my stuff and was very complimentary and just said, would you ever consider coming to write for me as well? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'm happy to write for anyone, really.
Is it strictly the music side is it the music side you write for Dom, or is it the wrestling side as well?
So no, so far I've written a couple of big features for him, and one of them was actually to do with the guy who makes Bray Wyatt's masks.
Oh, Jason Baker?
Jason Baker. Yeah, Jason Baker. So I did the feature. So Dom did the interview, and then said, he's like, you're the guy who can make this interview come to life. You know, could you write the feature for it? And I was like, sure. And then recently, just last week, I was putting together an article for him because he was interviewing Nita Strauss, who again has that kind of wrestling connection, but is definitely a rock icon as well. So it's all over the place, to be honest. And this is just the start of what I think is a very beautiful relationship.
His head's going to be so big after this conversation, but I think the world of Dom, and he's done so much for me. I've never actually met him in person. We was talking about this the other day. It's like, we want to do something so we can meet in person. But even when I first started my channel, he discovered my work, and he was so complimentary, and so like, I can help you if you need help. And he's just been like a mentor to me. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, and that sounded like I was putting him over. And I shouldn't be doing that, because that will give him a big head. And this is about you, my friend. I do apologize. No,
absolutely. Like the thing is, like, and you know, I don't have to say anymore, but with Dom, like the best thing I could say about him to put him over is everyone needs a Dom in their life. He's so supportive of everything that you do, and he looks out for everyone and things like that. And you know, it's more of a case of, I just like him to make sure he gets what he wants as well. So that's the last I'll say of it. But
me too.
Definitely a good guy. One of the good guys.
Definitely. So at this point, as you're writing in wrestling media and stuff for Soundspear, for Hard Rock, how is your fandom? Like, what are you watching? What are you enjoying in wrestling currently? Bearing in mind, this will be more of an evergreen and will air in a couple of months. I'll be totally
Yeah, absolutely. For me, like it just kind of catapulted it, because the next thing I knew is I'd been talked into going to WrestleMania 33, which is in Florida, Orlando. It was the one where The Undertaker and Roman Reigns had it, the match. They had that amazing stage where it was like the theme park one. And I went to that, and it was my first proper event where I went in media side. So I got to interview like so many people all the time. So like Seth Rollins, Nakamura, Oscar, etc. And it was so amazing to be there. And all it did was heighten it, to be honest. You end up kind of thinking, I've spoke to that person and now I've got a real vested interest in them, and like I just wish nothing for the best, nothing but the best for them, etc. So it kind of, if anything, like I know some people can make them a little bit jaded. It went the other way for me. Like it just, like I just wanted everything. I didn't need to consume everything. But fandom wise, that really then kicked me into thinking about like winding it slightly further. And at the time, there wasn't obviously things like AEW didn't exist. But there was NXT in arguably its best guys during the black and gold era. So I then started watching that weekly as well. So there was another. It started in an hour, then it moved to 2 hours. So yeah, that was another kind of content to consume.
So what about currently in 2023? What is your fandom? What are you watching? And more importantly, I'm always curious to know this from my guests. What do you have to watch for work? And then what would you be watching if you weren't involved in the media?
So I want to preface this with something completely. I am not one of these people who is tribal.
Tribalism isn't good.
Not at all. Like, I think there's as long as there's something for everyone, then everyone should be happy. So, you know, if you like WWE, great. If you don't, that's fine. And you like AW, but like, let other people enjoy what they enjoy. So I will preface it with that. But for me personally, I think I've been a WWE guy for a long time. And even to that extent, I actually love NXT, and I've loved NXT for every single iteration it's been through, whether it's 2.0, whether it's its current form or not. I think it's always been one of my favorite things, because I think I started on the journey really early with it, and then it's just continued through, and it's kind of under my skin quite a lot. And then when it comes to anything outside of it, I'm very reliant on other people to say, like, you should check out this match, or if you start seeing some hype around a match, whether it's Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom, like, it's not something that I would normally have watched, but I need to make sure that I watch it because a lot of people are talking about it. So what's the story there? And I think sometimes that's what I struggle with, is like, because I know I'm very well versed in WWE and I know the kind of backstories behind it, there's a lot more research that has to go in if I'm going to start writing about anything else. So I'm starting to, I do like to keep abreast of what happens in AEW week to week. So certainly keeping, if there's a match I need to see, or I'll see what's kind of coming up that week, then great, I'll make sure I cover that sort of thing. But I'm starting to write more about AEW moving forward. So, this is a great time for them. Very exciting for the British fans that have waited a little while for them to come over. That's going to be a huge show. That's a big story. So you'd be a fool not to cover them in some respects.
What about the shows that, obviously you talked about WWE there and talked about AEW a bit. Do you have one particular show that you're like, right, I don't have to cover this. This is my wrestling fan side of me show?
So far, I haven't actually written anything about North Wrestling in Newcastle, so an indie show up here. And I just enjoy going and kind of like chatting to them. But I have chatted to the owner, who is keen to kind of do something and make sure that those guys are getting some coverage, which I'm happy to do, because it's such an inclusive and up and coming brand. I think it's one of the best in the country, especially when it comes to like local talent and making sure people have a good time. That's all you can ask. So far that has just been fandom, but I do foresee that changing, because they've just announced a big show coming up in July where they've got Scotty 2 Hotty and Gangrel coming across from the US. So and there's stuff that I hope to look good in the future, like 1PW is doing great things as well in the UK. So those guys are in Doncaster and Lincoln, so it'd be interesting to see if I can get my toe in there. But I do like going to local shows just as more of a let's just enjoy some wrestling.
So if North did become sort of part of your work, quote unquote, would you have to find you listed a couple of other promotions, but would you have to find another one to be like, this is my fan time?
Possibly. I would maybe start to look elsewhere. Like, again, I hear sort of good things about Impact. So like trying to check.
Really? Sorry about that phone call.
So some of the stuff on Impact sounds like it's worth checking out. So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where I think you constantly have to have it in your mind I find it very difficult to shut off completely, to say, actually, there's a story here that I'd really like to write about. And maybe that's what it is. It's more of I'm not doing this in any other way. It's just, I want to write about it. So it's a passion piece. And I think that sometimes passion pieces are the best features or articles that you can do.
I fully agree with that. So as we look at wrapping this up soon, we're going to do a segment that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before, know this is where I ask my guests questions they might be asked on social media, such as their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite wrestler's theme, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler, to hopefully assist them in not having to answer them in the future. So, what is your favorite match of all time, Andy?
Oof, it's not like you start with a small one there. You just go full on straight into the.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Favorite match. I'm trying to think. It's probably the Adam Cole versus Johnny Gargano 2 out of 3 falls match at NXT Takeover Brooklyn. I was there, lucky enough to be there live, and I feel like I had a bit of an out of body experience when there was the false finish right at the end when Undisputed Era had come out. It was just incredible. Like the atmosphere was amazing. This is when NXT was flying. It's probably a slightly strange one, but yeah, definitely in terms of like emotional connection, that match was incredible.
Nah, that's about you, man. It's your choices at the end of the day. Favorite pay-per-view?
Again, it's going to be down the NXT route, but NXT Takeover New Orleans. Just everything about that card was absolutely phenomenal. The North American ladder match, the Roderick Strong joining Undisputed Era. There was the unsanctioned match between Ciampa and Johnny Gargano, which just, to be honest, like that build, like seeing Ciampa come out to like no music and just getting like so many people booing. Such a good feud, especially in those early kind of stages as well. All the way down to Aleister Black getting the NXT Championship as well. There just didn't seem to be a bad match on that card. It was fantastic.
I agree, because to pull the curtain back, that's not my favorite overall pay-per-view, but that is my favorite NXT takeover. So I really agree on that. But I shouldn't talk about myself. I do apologize.
If we were talking about outside of NXT, I'm trying to think. Like I really enjoyed the Money in the Bank where CM Punk leaves. Leaves
2011.
Yeah, I think it's 2011. It's like the Money in the Bank matches were great. That match was like kind of threaded through. And I really like when pay-per-views have that kind of thread throughout, where it's like there is something that you're waiting for and it's mentioned and things like that. But there's a couple of WrestleManias as well that I thought were great. Like 34 in New Orleans was great. It was very long, but the WrestleMania 35, the majority of that was very good because you had 3 huge stories like Kofi Mania, Becky Lynch winning in the main event. Even the start where Seth Rollins beats Brock Lesnar was fantastic. So there's some standout ones there for me as well.
Fair enough. I shouldn't say I agree, but I agree with all those choices. Favorite wrestler's theme of all time?
Theme. Oh, that's a great question, especially for someone who like me who has that kind of music side of things. There's something about Randy Orton's theme, not Voices, the one before.
Burning My Light.
Yeah, I love Burning My Light. Batista's theme was great. If you're looking for like instant kind of like what do you get excited for? Like if you hear Stone Cold's music live, this is fantastic. Same with The Rock, like just hearing that kind of like opening, like If You Smell. But even more recently, like Undisputed Era. I also think Nakamura's theme tune, is it Land of Rising Sun, is just incredible. Very well put together, and probably one of the better ones outside of Jim Johnson's stuff that he used to do. But yeah, I was a big fan. I think was it Def Rebel who did the stuff before now in NXT.
I'm not sure if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, they're responsible for quite a lot of the sort of not very modern ones, but that era when NXT was kind of coming through with like Kevin Owens and people like Sami Zayn, etc. So yeah, that kind of era was great as well.
Fair enough. As I say, I'm not too familiar with WWE themes, so that's helped me learn science. So I appreciate that. CFOs. That's it.
I think Death Row was the new one, but CFOs was the one where they were like, I really wish they'd managed to get over that financial dispute that they had.
Are they the ones that had Keith Lee's theme and then his theme got taken away?
Yes. So CFOs is the majority of the ones where if you really like their theme tune and now it's something else, it's because they went through a legal dispute with the distributors of CFO because they didn't own their own music, I think is right. And they had to, their management would take the money and then they wouldn't let them out of the contract, etc. things like that. So it was a horrible financial dispute, which is why I think WWE had to change the majority of them, because they just didn't want to pay the licensing out for each of them.
Fair enough. That's really cool. What about your favorite tag team?
Of all time,
Yeah.
Hardy Boys. There's pictures of me when I was a kid wearing Hardy Boys t-shirts. I had Jeff Hardy poster on my wall. Just WrestleMania 17 and seeing that TLC match is one of my all-time favorite matches as well. It's just exciting, exhilarating the whole way through, and I think those guys, along with Edge and Christian the Dudleys, changed tables and ladders, especially ladders matches, forever. And I have very fond memories of rooting for the Hardy Boys. More recently, again, Undisputed Era, if you count them as a tag team, not stable, but they'd be up there.
I had 2 tag teams. It works. Yeah, definitely. And then finally, as we wrap this up, who is your favorite wrestler?
Currently, I would probably have it down as either Johnny Gargano or Adam Cole. The reason for Johnny wrestling is because, and this was evident at the most recent match he had against Grayson Waller in LA. He just has this way of making you root for him. His matches, if you watch especially the NXT stuff, he's not really had too much of a chance outside of Elimination Chamber to really get you to do this. But he tells a story. He gets you to root for him to the point where everything else doesn't matter. It's just he has to win this match, otherwise I'll be very upset. And I just don't think he ever disappoints. But Adam Cole, I think, is similar in the sense of he knows how to sell everything. He's a very visual guy. I just think he understands it, and he just comes across as such a nice guy, even though a lot of the time his character isn't. But it's hard not to root for him when you watch stuff on YouTube where he's doing his up down down or the party stuff. So he's really cool. If you go in all time, Jeff Hardy and Chris Jericho would be up there. Maybe not so more their recent stuff, so it's difficult to separate that stuff out. But yeah, certainly those guys would definitely get a mention for me.
Fair enough. All good choices. As we wrap this up, the question I end all my interviews on is, with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very weird way. So what is one piece of work you want to be remembered for? And then what is one that you're like, if you could delete that, I would appreciate it?
I'm trying to think. So yeah, in terms of, if you go back, I wrote it's a piece on that's a great question. It's a cool piece. Probably I did a bit on Limp Bizkit about the My Way theme and the way it's tied into people's memories for WrestleMania 17, which you can find on RussianRock.com. And there's you can find all my work across there. But yeah, that's it. That bit telling that story of how the time period of new metal was very in at the time, and this was happening in wrestling, and then those two worlds collided. It was really fun to put that together. But equally, as recently as the last WrestleMania, I wrote a piece I was very proud of about Cody Rhodes and his journey, and spelling that out, because, as he says all the time, finish the story, and it's always about the story for me. In terms of something I wish I could do over or get rid of, I think this is going to sound horrible. I don't think there's anything really, other than maybe
that's fine.
That I would go back and maybe do it how I do it now. But my personal belief is, don't have any regrets, just have things you can learn from. And that's the same in writing as well. Don't hide, this is who I used to be and this is what I am now. It shows you the journey that you've gone on yourself. So don't regret anything, just make sure you learn from it.
I fully agree. But as we wrap this up, where can the good people find you and or your content?
Yeah, so you can find my writing over on RussianRock.com, and there's a whole plethora of articles, features, interviews, etc. that you can find on there. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Sporsy19. And if you want to find me on YouTube, if you search for either Wrestling Royalty or for my name, which is Andrew Spoors, you'll find me on there as well. We've got some really cool stuff coming up in the next couple of months and wider as well. So I really hope people get a chance to check that out. But yeah, just enjoy whatever's out there, and there's plenty more to come as well.
I'm really excited to see what you do in the future. We put Dom over, but I'm going to put you over. One of my favorite writers to read their content, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you, my friend. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash, and I will see you in the next video. A goodbye now.